Michail Antonio got injured on international duty for Jamaica, I think it's easy to say we saw this come in. We knew that it was absolutely typical and stuff like that. Truth of the matter is, he's had a really, really good run. For over 2 years now, he's managed to avoid serious injury, and that's remarkable because he was previously an injury-prone player. I think it would do a disservice to say this is typical and we knew it was going to happen. Do a disservice to Antonio, do a disservice to the West Ham medical team and, of course, the Jamaican medical team as well. They've all done really, really good things in terms of diet, in terms of stretching, in terms of sort of preemptive medical care, putting on private jets to take him to and from international duty. People couldn't have done more, and I would say the same for Antonio himself. Well done. However, just in the law of averages, it's bound to happen at some point, I guess. And, well, it's happened now. Now, whilst that might not have been utterly predictable based on the last 2 or 3 years, it certainly was predictable that he was going to come back from Jamaica in pretty poor form. He usually does. So it's not going to, I don't think, massively impact the next couple of games for West Ham, because I think David Moyes probably would have had different things in his mind anyway, rather than playing Michail Antonio up front against Burnley. It's probably also worth pointing out that Michail Antonio had been dropped from the team in the last 2 games anyway. So David Moyes would probably had one eye on looking at doing something different. One of the things he's started to do is play Jarrod Bowen up front. As you know, because I've discussed it on a couple of occasions on this channel already, is that I think Bowen is probably effective when we don't have the ball very much. We're playing on the counter-attack. When the opposition are going to sit back and sit deep, then I think we've got a bit of a problem on our hands, because then it becomes a more attritional job. You're playing more as a traditional sort of target man with your back to goal. You're going to end up sort of wrestling with big burly central defenders. And, you know, Jarrod Bowen's just not that kind of guy. Much better off on the counter-attack. For those type of games where people are sitting back and it is more attritional, you do need somebody, well, so let's say you do, we do under David Moyes need one of those players that's like Michail Antonio. So I do think he'll be a loss, even though I've said more recently that I wouldn't particularly have had him starting. What it does throw into sharp focus is what David Moyes' backup plan is, because he can't play Jarrod Bowen for 90 minutes up front in every game. So then we start coming to the juicy part of the conversation, really, because it boils down to Danny Ings and Divin Mubama. Now, for the purposes of this argument, I'm going to omit Maxwell Cornet. Discussed him a couple of days ago on here. I do think he can play as a striker, and as Gio mentioned the other day, look, he is our most versatile player in terms of he can play right wing, he can play left wing, he can play as a left wing back, and he can play as a striker. I think, bearing in mind he's available for at least 3 of the positions that we play on a regular basis in our starting lineup, and he can't get in once, probably tells you all you need to know about what Moyes thinks of Maxwell Cornet. So I'm just going to exclude him from the conversation here. David Moyes has an issue now, and that is that in some of the games, he is going to have to play someone other than Jarrod Bowen up front. So Divin Mubama or, of course, Danny Ings. It has to be Mubama. It really does. Myself and Gio were discussing the injury, just how good West Ham's injury record has been. I think we were discussing it in our mug of tea over on Patreon the other day. And certainly very, very recently, every single player was available and fit to West Ham. And Gio was comparing it to other clubs like Newcastle, like Brighton, who have been decimated with injury. West Ham have done really, really well. We've been able to get most players fit, ready and available. To such an extent, we've seen not only the youngsters not able to get their chance, but really good players, seasoned internationals like Thilo Kehrer have not been able to really get much game time at all. And I'm pretty sure David Moyes would have said to some of those players that when there's an injury, you'll get your chance. Maybe that's the story that's being spun to the young players as well. Well, now there is an injury, and now's the time. And I do think it's really important that David Moyes gets this absolutely right. For everybody, for himself, for the team. And when I say himself, he's got rid of a bit of the pressure with the last 2 games. Make no mistake about it, go into a little bit of a spiral and start getting some poor results again, then the pressure's going to be back on him. The narrative around David Moyes has changed because the messaging from the club has changed. It was very much 2 weeks ago that David Moyes was under pressure. David Moyes won't be offered a new deal. Tim Steidten's in charge, all of that sort of stuff. And then you saw within 2 weeks the narrative and the leaks from the club had changed to, oh, well, it's a little bit early to offer him a new contract yet. chalk and cheese, honestly, night and day. It really is, and which makes it quite hard to follow, but it makes it predictable in as much as David Moyes is going to come under pressure if he loses games. If he wants to win games, he needs to get his striking situation sorted out, and he really does. The Danny Ings situation is a strange one, and this is why I've always been an advocate of having not just a general bunch of journalists in the press conference. The trouble is with a journalist from a newspaper or radio station is that they might be covering West Ham this week, it might have been Aston Villa last week, it might have been Man United the week before. They don't have an encyclopedic knowledge. You're just not going to get those type of journalists asking the tough questions, particularly when it's pertaining to somebody like Mubama. There's a number of questions I'd like to ask David Moyes, and on this one, I'd certainly like to ask him about Danny Ings. And I'd ask him, why do you think Danny Ings works? What is it that you are seeing that we're not? Now, he's not scored in 20 games. So, I mean, it would be sort of pointless saying that he's not scored in 20 games. What about if he doesn't score in 30? David Moyes' answer would probably be to come back that he does something else. He offers something else to the team. I'd like to know what it is. It's not assists. I don't think he stretches the back line of a defence. I don't think he's good at dropping deep and holding the play up. I just don't think he suits our style of play at all for reasons I've said on numerous occasions, and I know many of you would agree on that. So I think when you're looking at somebody like that, it's what you can't say is if Divin Mubama comes in, he won't score. Because Danny Ings doesn't score, can't score, won't score. So clearly you're going to take that out of it. I would imagine at some point if Divin Mubama got 20 games, and obviously not all of them are going to be starts, at some point during those 20 games, he'll score for West Ham. I'm pretty damn confident in that. But let's look at the other things. Let's look at the pressing. Let's look at the pace. Let's look at the way he stretches defenders. I think there's a lot more to Mubama's game that would benefit West Ham than Danny Ings has got. I really do. And I also think that, I would be surprised if Danny Ings stays in the January transfer window for all parties concerned. I don't be surprised if West Ham hung on to a player who was ineffective. I'd be surprised if Danny Ings wanted to stay. I mean, it's just not worked out for him at all. And I'm pretty sure there'll be a club somewhere, even, I was going to say somewhere in England, be it in the Premier League or the Championship, but, who's to say abroad who could do with a poacher, who are going to play a slightly more expansive and attacking game, who get the ball into the box in a way that we don't, and who would better suit Danny Ings' style of football. So what's David Moyes going to do? He's got to do something. And if what he wants to do is he wants to give Mubama the encouragement to sign a new contract, then he's got to play him. There's no excuse now. There's really not. Because I tell you what, it's very, very hard. This could actually be make or break when keeping Mubama. Maybe he's not going to sign a contract at all. If he doesn't, I don't particularly blame him. But now's the time to give him a little bit of encouragement. We've been here before. We've absolutely been here before. Remember Elise, who went to Sunderland, the centre-back? There was a point, not last season, season before last, when everyone was injured. I mean, everyone. The only player that was, in fact, the only person that was even half fit at that point was Issa Diop, and he had to be rushed back. Everyone was out. And there was just the perfect opportunity to play Elise to see if he would be any good. He didn't get played then, and he sort of knew. At that point, I remember saying in videos, he knows there are no circumstances which can occur which mean that Elise will start at centre-back for West Ham United. And I think we're going to approach that now with Divin Mubama. He's been training with the first team for a long time. He's had first-team inclusion. He's scored, obviously, in the Europa and the Conference League last season. So now's the time. Now is his time. And I think it's very, very hard for David Moyes to make a case now if he doesn't get involved at all. Now, I don't expect him to start, but what I do expect him to be now is that first choice name off the bench. Because if he gets to a situation where Antonio's injured, Bowen is now, let's say, the number one striker for when Antonio's injured, and he may have been that anyway. And he's not going to be able to play 90 minutes. At that point, there's going to need to be a substitution being made. If what happens when they're stood on that touchline and Danny Ings is sent on rather than Divin Mubama, I do think Mubama would have every right just to turn around and say, I'm out of here. I will not sign a contract under any circumstances. There is no way forward for me at West Ham. In the same way that Elise could possibly say, with all the strikers, basically, I've got a striker that hasn't scored in 20 goals. The other striker, injured. There are only 3 of us in terms of, sort of out-and-out strikers. Only 3 of us. One of them can't score. The other one's injured. These are the circumstances when I played. If I can't get a game now, I'm never going to get a game at this bloody club. I'm out.